So I'm just turning the fan on up just a little.
Hey Siri, turn on the fan.
Sorry, I wasn't able to find anything like
Hey, said sorry. Can't do it.
Oh my goodness, all the devices listening. So, Meetesh, welcome to the CTO studio.
Thanks for having me, Etienne.
I feel like the only times we see each other is never.
Yeah, it's been a while, and I'm missing it. Back when you used to travel to Austin once a month, pre-pandemic, and then the combination of that not happening, and then the pandemic, and I feel like you're miles away.
I know. It used to be like I was living in Austin, right? Because you'd only see fellow Austin people when you saw me.
Right. Exactly.
My
That's 100% my network, was just everyone that Etienne brought to the table.
I refuse to believe that. You're like Austin's most wanted CTO, bro. Come on.
Well, I appreciate that. No, it's been good to be one. I think one of the benefits of being in the same spot, like in Austin, for this long, is that it's a little bit easier to build a network.
How did you pick Austin?
That's a funny story. At the end of the day, actually ended up with my best friend in college and I doing a Rochambeau war while in the gym on stationary bikes. But ultimately, it came down to I had interned at Microsoft in '97. I interned at Trilogy, which was out of Austin in '98. And I interviewed at a bunch of other places and then decided that it was going to come down to Trilogy or Microsoft. I had basically made up my mind that it was going to be Trilogy. I wanted to go somewhere smaller. I liked Austin when I was there for the summer. At that time, Austin was 600, 700,000 people, a lot smaller than it is now. And I liked the idea of it being entrepreneurial, focused on a lot of responsibility. And in playing, kind of a Rochambeau rock paper scissors war with my best friend, Trilogy ended up winning, and so that just was confirmed my leaning already, and so
solid
the rest
proof,
is history.
Solid proof that the universe exists.
Exactly.
Man, it's hard to imagine Austin as 600, 700,000 people.
Yeah, it was just completely different. It was way smaller. There just wasn't. There was lots of live music as always, but a lot of the rest of the culture that's here just wasn't there.
Do you think Austin is what it is today because it's not Texans?
I think it's both, because there's always been a big cohort of people that wanted to keep Austin its old self, right? The old keep Austin weird crowd, and that you have the push of everyone coming in from outside of Austin and Texas, that push there, and then their pull from the other side has kept it kind of this unique mixture, and I think that's what really has made it Austin.
And so now we're at how many millions of people?
I think the metro area is around 2 million people, a little over 2 million people. I think it's something. Last I looked, I think we're the 11th largest city in the U.S. Maybe that changed. But.
I deeply miss my Austin trips and counting on those coming back very soon.
Oh, we'll certainly take you out here now.
So, Meetesh, the zebra, obviously a beautiful success story in the sense that escaping the clutches of startup drudge, scaling successfully into a wonderful company, and then scaling into like unicorn territory. So you CTOing a company through that type of scale, just give me an anecdotal view of how your life as CTO changed just through all those different levels.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a little bit surreal. I was talking to someone today that if we go back to, essentially three of us in a warehouse, no code, no team, no product, no business, there was always this aspiration that, okay, we're going to be $1 billion company. And you have that confidence in it, but it's so far away. And then to think about it now, it's like, well, not only am I CTO of a successful company and I helped build it, but it's a successful $1 billion plus company, right? And that it's hard to fathom sometimes, right? There's the excitement of it that we've created so many jobs and built this business. There's the part that you're scared of, which is that we built this business and all these people who are counting on us to make some, important decisions and keep it going. But, I think if you look at it various phases early on, it's very much you're making things happen yourself, right? Like I was in the code, I was building stuff. Even when I was building some teams around me, I was making things happen. Then that second stage, it was more about I was growing the management and building the people around me to go make it happen, right? I was still involved, but at a higher level from that. And then, I'd say the kind of third stage was stepping back out and leading through kind of vision, strategy, providing some structure to those people that I'd kind of spent time growing and building, and then circling back with them kind of behind the scenes, helping to looking across the business a lot more was a big part of that one. To help actually, I'd say probably between phases 2 and 3 is when I shifted from being a technologist first to a business person first, with a technology background and slant, right? So my first team, you say, with the first, 5 dysfunctions of a team became that business team, the C-suite, the executive team. And then, it's interesting. I was actually just thinking yesterday and today about this new step, and that I think it's yet another stage of growth where I'm even one step further out, right? And further back and figuring out what that means. How, I'm looking, instead of figuring out what we need to do, for example, on data later this year, I'm thinking about, as the team grows this year and next, how do we take something that gets a lot of benefit out of being centralized, but not create a bottleneck for growing the company in the future, right? And that's not something we're fixing this month or next month or even by the end of the year, but that's something we're going to need to start to fix and shift, and it's going to take a long time, right? And so my horizons expanded, which means in some ways it's exciting. You get, as a technologist, you always want to think about stuff. You love the thinking ideas, but the box checking of getting stuff done, that doesn't really happen anymore.
That's amazing, and it actually brings me straight to what I want to talk about, which is, at 7 CTOs, we talk about that shielding function that the CTO has. And I often talk about it as the 3 to 5 year viability of your organization. Specifically, how tech enables that, how technology threatens that, how technology is susceptible to vulnerabilities as other companies come up, as regulation comes in, as the world changes. The CTO is starting to think, and I love that you said that, because you're starting to say, okay, my first team is now really the C-suite, like you said, the first group that you're committed to. I mean, you're always committed to the C-suite, but it's like they are your team now. And how do we keep our business viable for the near future and for the medium term?
Right. Yeah. No, it's an interesting change and shift in philosophy, and one where it's really hard to know if you're making a lot of the right decisions, because the time horizon for that feedback loop of figuring out whether you are or not is so far in the future. So it's a lot more about thinking about, okay, one, what do I think? Where do I think I need to be? Two, what are the steps? Now, can I break it down? How would I get there? And then how can I test and learn along the way to give me some sense of, are we moving in the right direction? And also, have I chunked it up appropriately such that if we're not, we can change directions without going too far down one path. But it is also, it's a place where it is, you do have to take some bigger risks, right? Because you're talking about things further down the road, which means that experience plays a big part, right? Experience doesn't mean you're going to be right every time. In fact, I often look at experience, oftentimes more so than not, tells you what not to do than what to do.
I also think of experience as the confidence to do things, and inexperience as the lack of confidence. So let's talk a little bit about how you navigated compliance and risk. There was certainly a stage that you entered where the technology innovation was built, the product market fit was there, the traction was forming, growth was happening. And I think I remember specifically when you moved into your new spot, which I guess probably a ghost town. You still have it? Or?
We still have it. We have minimal capacity in the office now, talking about return to the office, but it's still there.
So I remember, I think you got your SOC 2 compliance right before or right when you moved in there.
Right before it.
So what I want to sort of pick your brain on is being a CTO who went from the 3-person idea all the way through to the $1 billion plus. That zone where you became aware of the fact that, okay, there's this regulatory stuff that I'm sure wasn't super damn exciting for you to work on. But just talk me through a little bit, and again, it can be unstructured thoughts, but just tell me a little bit how you navigated that, and let's dig into that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we start back prior to we kicked off the effort of building a security privacy compliance program in March of 2019. So if we look before that, I had done and gotten PCI compliance in the past. I'd done some of these things at other places, and I knew I wanted to avoid as much of that as possible for as long as possible, because in my mind, having to deal with a lot of that would slow us down. It would mean that we could be less nimble, less agile. It's not that I didn't see the value in it; it's that I wanted to build our business and our technology as much as possible without having to deal with that. And so that's why
specifically PCI compliance.
PCI compliance, but also things like, when we were working with carriers, if they said, great, we need you to abide by all of these, these security standards and privacy things, I was like, okay, what is driving those? And can we do things that would get us around those, so we don't have to, we can be secure, we can be safe, right? But we don't have to actually comply with those things.
For instance, the classic PCI question of how can we avoid having to be level whatever compliant?
Right.
Well, in technology, we can do this and this and this. And so you're saying sort of what can we do in technology that would expose us to the least amount of compliance adherence?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. While still being,
secure and all that.
Secure and safe and best practices. But, can we do it by our business strategy and our architecture first? And so that carried us a long way. And it's why, we still don't collect credit card information, but it's why we pushed that further down the road. I knew that if we got into that stuff, it was going to distract us and prevent us from being able to move quickly in some areas. So, fast forward to, I want to say late 2018, early 2019 is when we finally started getting big enough where the insurance carriers that we were working with and that we wanted to work with started to demand things like, hey, where's your SOC 2? They're heavily regulated companies, public companies. So they have, regulations from being a public company, public markets. They have their, fintech, insurtech. And so, finally we got to a point where like, okay, great. There's a certain amount of this we need to actually solve because in order to play with the big boys and to reach that next stage of growth.
Okay. So basically, as a function of growth,
Mm-hmm.
you started seeing that not being compliant in certain regulations started inhibiting your ability to grow your business.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. To grow. And so that's where we again said, okay, so now what do we need to do? How can we go attack, build a program that will help us, cover the bases that we need to, satisfy these carriers, get them on board, but also not stop all of our progress. And so that's when we started to look at and really took the approach, which I know is a modern approach, and it's starting to become more pervasive now, to security and compliance, of not how do we be secure, how do we say no to things, how do we not take on any risk, but how do we build a program that helps us detect, evaluate, understand, and measure the risk, and then communicate that risk to the right places so that the leaders within the company can make informed decisions on what risk to take on and what risk not to take on, or that can inform our mitigation strategies around, okay, great, this risk level is too high for this thing we want to do, but is there something we can do that maybe isn't, get PCI compliance? And I'm not saying that we'd collect credit card information without that. I'm just saying something that's not as burdensome as that. Can we do something to mitigate that risk, to get it below a threshold where it's not zero, but it's to a level that we want to accept given the stage of company?
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I love the idea of taking it as far as you can to be nimble, efficient, stay within the acceptable security space or risk mitigation space, and then coming up with a assessment plan or some way to help your leaders make the right decisions.
Right. Exactly.
So is that the detect and evaluate, understand, measure the risk? Is that something that is formalized and you can walk me through, or is that just
It is formalized, and so here I can give you an example, when we're talking about third parties, right? So here's a common thing, which is one of the tenets that a lot of carriers will ask for, that is part of SOC 2, is needing to have a third party risk assessment program or methodology, which is, I want to work with, let's say I want to send emails through SendGrid, right? Well, we need to understand what the risk is of doing that. Are they going to, if we're going to send PII through there, are they going to take care of the PII who has access to it? There are, if you look at something like OLARC for chat, for example, they explicitly state that they do not adhere to, I will say that at the time we looked at them, I do not know if they've changed or not. They explicitly stated we don't.
this part of the conversation sponsored by OLARC?
Yeah, exactly. That we don't adhere to any security standards. We don't say anything about it. It's up to you to, as the user, to take care of everything, right? That's their view. They're like, we're providing you the tool. We do nothing there. Well, then you go to, so let's do that one, because that's a good one to walk through. So then you look at, we have all these questions, in this program to say, okay, does OLARC run antivirus on their servers? Do they have pen testing? What do they do with PII? All these things, and you score them. And something like OLARC would get a pretty poor score. But then that there is the, use that score to look at, okay, now with that score, what is the risk? What is the likelihood that something would happen? With that kind of a score, high. But what is the impact of something like that happening? That can be pretty low, because if the only information coming through chat is, hi, how's it going? How are you? Okay, what happens if it gets breached? It doesn't really matter, right? Now, if people are sending their social security number and credit card information and driver's license number and stuff through chat, the impact of a breach is a little bit higher, right?
Well,
And
people can also respond to, "Hi, what's your first name?" with "My social security
it
is
is
what."
not exactly. But so that's the program we kind of created, which is a matrix of developing. So a set of questions where you can either take another company's SOC 2 or security attestment and information and map it to that, or we provide the questionnaire to a third party and they fill it out, which we score, and then that helps us plug it into understanding this formula of very simple of risk equals likelihood times impact.
Mm.
And then once you get that, you have a structure of great for this level of risk in this area. A certain person it has to go at least to a certain person to accept that risk, right? And
Got
then
it.
it walks up the chain
Okay.
to a certain level
So
of
if the
risk.
score if the score is this, it's got to be signed off by so and so and so and so.
Right. And then at some level, that goes up to only our CEO or the CEO and the board can accept this level of risk because it's existential to the company.
I love
Right.
it. And so for me, that's an example of the CTO facilitating basically risk assessment inside of the company.
Exactly. It's one of those where I mean, you may have faced this as a technologist, which is a lot of times, I've seen it where we can be pigeonholed as naysayers, right? Because we're thinking, while other people are thinking about all the way, like things they want to do, we're thinking about all the reasons that idea won't work, all the risks, all the problems, right? Like that's innate in our nature is to think through all the edge cases, right? And all the things that'll break. But I think it's important to, especially when it comes to security, to think about it the other way, which is how do you use what you know to enable the org, to push the org forward, and to help the organization make informed decisions so they're not navigating blind.
Yeah, I think especially as you're rapidly growing and as
Mm-hmm.
departments, obviously there are X number of tools in every single department to make life easier. And as the VPs in those departments want to enable their own teams and sign up for their own services, I'm sure that there's just an exponential increase in all the different services and third party tools that your team wants to use and
Mm-hmm.
insists on using. And to constantly be, and I'm sure that's where the moment where you're like, okay, hang on. I can't
Yeah,
just be the person who keeps painting a bleak picture about this. Let me create a rubric or a matrix or something so people can decide how this escalates inside of the company.
exactly. And at the same time, we also had, to go back to what drove a lot of this. We had carriers, right, that we wanted to work with, but we also had CCPA, so the California Consumer Privacy Act, coming up. I believe it's Privacy Not Protection Act. That coming out, which was modeled a lot off of GDPR. A lot of talk, around there at some point being a federal privacy law. And then a lot of states started putting out their own cybersecurity and privacy regulations. New York being one of the most prominent ones outside of California. In the Department of Financial Services, there put out some pretty detailed regulations around cybersecurity and privacy. And so a lot of those things were also kind of pushing us to where we wanted to make sure that we weren't putting our business at risk by not complying with them.
So there is the business drive to grow beyond the regulatory limitations. For instance, public companies wanting to work with you, demanding or requesting certain types of risk assessments, or those dreaded questionnaires we have to fill out. General regulatory stuff. But then there is the impact that a breach or some sort of predatory lawsuit, or especially, and this is one thing about you guys, now that you're a unicorn, so you're attracting attention. There's probably a lot of, I mean, I don't know if you can talk about this, probably not, but companies like you become susceptible to ransomware. There's sort of that dark side of things where it's like, I think with GDPR fines, lawyers will or firms will proactively sue you to see if they can not extort, but sort of win lawsuits of like $4 per user account per month, blah, blah, blah kind of stuff. I mean, that has to suck.
It does. And I mean, we've definitely dealt with some of that for sure. And you can see, who they are, right? A quick Google will tell you that this person has a reputation for doing this, right? And that's where, working with the right, legal firms, we have outside counsel also. And then, like you said, it really, that was one more driving factor in the timing of when we started to get this buttoned up, is we knew that we wanted to invest in our brand, right? And in growing our visibility. And there's a lot of benefits to that, but one of the big risks is exactly what you pointed out, which is more visibility means not only more good people coming, but more bad actors coming as well. And so that was another big driving factor, is we knew that it would take a while to get everything in place and get everything shored up. And so we wanted to start that process early enough so that when we get to this point, like that we've done our due diligence, right? You can never be 100% secure. There's always some risk somewhere, right? But we want to do our best to try to find all of the massive areas of risk and mitigate and eliminate them, and implement best practices to keep some of those bad actors out.
Okay, so when you started with the security, privacy, compliance process, was that you said that was around 2019? Was
the beginning of 2019.
Was that specifically driven by business, or was it driven by? Were you informing yourself? Were you learning about things? Was there an unease that you developed when you maybe saw how someone was copying a root password and slacking it to someone? I mean,
that unease never goes away, right? That was always there. So that was part of it. Part of it was that, in previous years, we'd have, our business development, our commercial org kind of reach out and say, hey, they want us, this carrier wants us to agree to this. And I would go and say, no, we're not going to agree to any of those things, right? But we finally got to a point where they're like, okay, great, we can't anymore, right? Like that worked, and they were able to, given our size and stage and where we were. But now the carriers were going after the size we were. We can no longer say, no, we're talking our way out of it. We need to. So then I said, okay, great, we need to do this. Then let's go figure out what that means. I don't want to just kind of, placate them or, throw empty words on there and say, yes, we do, when we don't. I want to figure out what it means to do this. And I was, worried, because while I've been in tech for my entire life and been around security and privacy, that was never my primary focus, right? That was never my profession. I was never a chief security officer, CISO. I was never an InfoSec professional. And so I reached out around, and that's where I actually, we brought on a virtual CISO, Seth Robertson, who's part of the 7 CTOs community, to help us kind of build that program and navigate these waters, where I had, on one side, business and moving quickly, and then I had, security and experience here, and then my job became to understand both and find that middle ground that allowed us to do the right things from a security and privacy standpoint, build that program, understand our risk, and be thoughtful and protect ourselves, but also move quickly. But it was absolutely scary, right? Where when it comes down to it, I was making decisions on things on how we build our program, not without support, but I was the main person making these decisions in an area where like I'm not the expert.
So on that point, I have a couple questions. So in the thick of all of this, when you started with the compliance stuff and regulatory and SOC 2, how much of your time would you say in a given month maybe were you spending on this? Is it less than 50%, hopefully?
Early on, I mean, the very beginning, getting things going, I'd say it probably was about 50% of my time, right? But that's getting, finding a virtual CISO. There was a lot of education about our business. There was a lot of, reviewing of plans. And as things got going, I want to say I was probably spending 10 hours a week.
Okay.
So about a quarter of my time.
A quarter sounds about right. Yeah.
And so it stayed at that level for a while until we got larger and started to grow out some of the roles around it. We brought on someone who's going to focus a little bit on DevSecOps. We started to, we brought on a director of compliance. We started to build some pieces around there and a team, at which point, my role stepped back a little bit further to now being more of a stakeholder, participating in steering committees and things like that, but less actively involved in pushing the day-to-day forward.
So your just so I can learn from this, your director of compliance typically does what?
So the director of compliance, she's kind of focused. She came in originally focused on both security and privacy compliance, but compliance expands beyond that, right? And so her compliance, she's focused also on some of our agency and licensing compliance, compliance with federal statutes, and then in the future it can expand also to include financial compliance, right? It's a pretty broad term, and it's one of those orgs that in general you want it to be somewhat independent, right? It's a governance org, right? You want there to be some friction. You want it to have a little bit of that push and pull with the rest of the business, so that you can't just say wave away and say like, yeah, that's great, we're not going to do this, right? Like there needs to be a little bit of that.
Yeah. For instance, I want to upgrade my New Relic plan. They want me to sign this 5-page contract. It's going off to the director of compliance to sign off on it, and then you do that. Yeah.
Exactly, right. Who's going to do a legal review? Exactly that, right? And so there's legal compliance too. And so that's what So there's compliance is a like parallel or to InfoSec, to security and to privacy. It is necessary to have both of them, but it's not a replacement for security or privacy.
Yeah. Oh man, this is how an innocent young startup turns into the man.
It is, and there, I mean, there are tools and people out there. One of the tools that we've invested in recently, and we started out and have been for a while, is KnowBe4, KNOWBE4. And so we started using them for some of our security awareness training, for our privacy training. But then they also have a compliance manager, which allows you to upload a lot of your programs, and your controls into there. And then, you can track compliance against them. It lets you put your questionnaires that you're talking about, that all of us get to answer, put them in there so that people, other third parties can answer their questions, or you track them right there, aligned with everything. And so, we started to grow and the team and the program, we also started finding and investing in some of these tools.
Wow. On just to wrap up the compliance stuff. So how about insurances, cyber insurance, and all that stuff? How did you manage that?
So that's always been, we've had a lot of that from day one, and so that didn't really fall under my umbrella. It fell under our EVP of Finance and Admin.
Okay.
because that was something that even before we, kind of really put together an InfoSec program, a formalized InfoSec compliance and security program, that was something that we needed to do. So I was involved in it, right? That in order to get cyber insurance and E&O insurance, all this stuff, you have to fill out a big questionnaire. And a big chunk of that questionnaire is around security, privacy practices. So I was always involved in that, and we worked with third-party firms as brokers to help get us that coverage. But I wasn't the one driving it, and so I was involved but not driving it.
Yeah, I think probably I'm just gonna guess that if someone wasn't driving it, you'd probably at some point would have said, "Hey, there's some risk here, and there's only so much we can do. What is the backdoor protection to some sort of breach?"
Absolutely. And our program that we put together did inform our renewal the next year, right? Which is, we were now able to answer questions differently, but it also helped us understand what things we should now go and pay attention to make sure they are covered. Do we have appropriate levels of coverage in different areas based on what our program is, what risks we're covering with our security and privacy program? What else do we need, right? And so it helped inform it. But yeah, you're right. Like, that would have come up right away, because one of the things that is in a lot of these contracts and security addendums is that as a partner, you will carry the appropriate level of cybersecurity insurance, right? That's just something now that's becoming more and more standard, which is a little bit of CYA, but just kind of helping ensure that the burden isn't only on one person in the entire ecosystem, that everyone's kind of doing their part.
Yeah. Is securing that insurance, have you seen that be a requirement from your larger partners? And okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Producing that.
Yeah, and usually they'll actually have, depending on it, they'll have certain levels that you have to have, and we actually like certain amounts of coverage and things like that. And we actually took that approach as well, which is, one of the things we did in these questionnaires and the third-party risk assessment is we started and we said, great, here are all the things we could ask, right, to understand risk, and let's pare that down. And so to the ones that we thought were the most critical and impactful to the company. And we did, but even those were still somewhat like onerous and burdensome. And so after that was in practice for a little while, we took a second look at it and said, okay, how can we still satisfy the needs, but pare that down even more? And part of it was, okay, let's push some of the onus of this onto the partners as opposed to onto us. So we wrote up a standard security addendum, which is nothing extravagant. It actually covers most of the best practices. It's only like 10 items or so, and nothing that is controversial. Like it's all things like, great, we'll have antivirus on endpoints. You'll do some, annual pen testing. It's just some very standard things that are recommended best practices. But we add that to all of our contracts. Right. And so right there with that, we're pushing some of that burden onto our partners to help balance not having to be quite so exhaustive in asking about it.
Is it something where you can almost say, hey, right click save as from our website?
Yeah, almost, right? Yeah. Like we have a standard. Yeah. We have a standard security addendum. We don't do that mostly because there is sensitive information that can be in the SOC 2 and some of these security documents. So a lot of times we'll want to sign an NDA.
Okay, got it.
Right.
Got it.
And a lot of carriers actually do that because the best security documents actually give you a little bit of insight into what's under the covers, but that's stuff that you don't want getting into the wrong hands.
Okay.
And so, but the actual security addendum itself is just a standard template that we worked with our counsel to create that just gets added to every single contract.
And are there certain certifications or compliance regulations that you require, that you you as the zebra have decided before we do business, we want to see A, B, or C?
We don't require anything, but we do, ask for the people's SOC 2. That's becoming the de facto, right? Which is, can you send us your SOC 2 report? And so in absence of that, we'll ask them a little bit more, exhaustive questionnaire to understand their program and evaluate it. But we don't make anything strictly a requirement. Along those same lines as our goal is not to, our goal is to help enable the business to move forward quickly, but safely. And our goal is never to say no, but it's to say yes, and here's how, or yes, but here's the risk, and so we never wanted to say we will draw a line in the sand saying we will only ever do this, because at the end of the day, it always depends. It depends on the scope of what we're using it for, how many people, how long it's going to be out there. Maybe their security is adequate for the service they're providing.
Yeah, no, I like that perspective. And I spoke, one of my conversations with an insurance broker in this space was, it's really a game of where the risk or where the liability lands, and all the actors in that. If you have your insurance, you have your compliance, the risk moves or the liability moves from you, downstream or parallel, but that you really want to get out of the way of where the liability lands.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why, me personally, when I look at contracts, right, the two areas I pay the most attention to are intellectual property, who owns the IP, and indemnification, right? Which is the last thing you want to do is sign yourself up to be on the hook for someone else's, mistakes or oversights or negligence. And so, in my mind, that's right along those lines of, you just got to understand, and that risk has got to be spread out. It's got to be diffuse. It can't be, focused in just one area, when in actuality it is, spread out.
Yeah. So tell me, just on that comment about intellectual property, what are your concerns?
My biggest concern is that something that we will unintentionally or accidentally or by contract that is ours will be made property of a partner, right? And so what I usually look for is something that says, essentially defines the intellectual property in a sufficiently broad but relevant capacity, and says that the stuff that is the property of us at the Zebra is our property and will remain our property, and is restrictive in terms of the rights. It doesn't give them rights to use it as their own property or make money off of it. But that's the key thing, is just understanding, does the contract all of a sudden say they can go and treat this property as their own for free?
Got it. And that IP generally in your data and your transforms and what you do to data, or in your code, or in your process,
in anything. So, for example, when we, I hope Seth will be okay with me sharing this, but when we, put together our agreement with working with him as a virtual CISO, we drew the line in terms of our specific security program is our property, because he was working under contract to develop it for us.
Got it.
But any generic tools and frameworks that he came up with in the process of making this that weren't specific to us, but that he used or developed, could be his property.
Got it.
Right. And so, but being very clear about that, that just because he couldn't just take the program he developed for us and go and say that's his program and go repurpose it and sell it. That's our program.
Got it. That's a good example. And I think Seth would be totally fine with that.
Yeah.
I love how you sort of hone straight into the IP and the indemnification as sort of, let me just scan through this, but I do want to see something mentioned about these 2 or 3 things.
Yeah, those are the key. I mean, I look at termination, you look at things like that, right? But those are things that that I also feel like any good counsel will catch.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, any good counsel will catch the indemnification too, right? Like that's they're all looking at risk and liability, but those are the two that I like to pay particular attention to.
I like that. So I want to wrap up with some questions around the engineering teams, the departments. When it comes to risk management, your team arguably carries the greatest impact in doing things they're not supposed to, knowing things they're not supposed to, potentially inadvertently sharing information they're not supposed to, whether they on board or whether they're off board. So a lot of this stuff, I mean, is encapsulated in playbooks and training, but also in culture and a culture of risk management, understanding the risk, a culture of succession, disaster recovery, redundancy. So talk me through a CTO. I know when you said you went into the second phase, it goes from building the machine to building the machine that builds the machine.
Yep.
So how has that been for you? And is there a couple points that you want to speak to on that?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, there's definitely training and education around it. You know, there's best practices training, security training, and there's even things such as, you know, when it comes to privacy, only expose certain bits of data to people who truly have a need to know. So, for example, everyone has access to our BI system and our analytics and our data, but a very limited set of people have access to email addresses of consumers and actual personal information. Right? We use the technology and roles and groups and privileged access to limit that, so that it doesn't stop everyone from doing their work. They can still do it, but we don't even give the majority of the people the opportunity to accidentally do something. But then ultimately, I think it really does come down to, as you're building that machine, building that culture. And I'll go back to what I said, that culture of not saying no, but that culture of helping work with the rest of the company to figure out how and to manage the risk. Because I think if you end up with a culture where anytime, you know, a developer or, you know, a team wants to go do something, they're like, oh, I have to go through this onerous process. It's going to take forever. And they're just going to say no anyway. I'm just going to go do it because, and then hope they don't find out about it. Right.
Shortcut.
That's one. Yeah, that's one side. But the other side is, you know what? Yeah, I got to go through this process, but they always get back to me right away. They're going to help me make this better. You know, they're going to make me figure out, you know, if I'm doing this, you know, login system, when should I lock out? How should I do it? Like what is secure? You know, they're going to help me figure that out and understand the risk to make it so that I can hit my deadline, but do it in a safe way and protect the company. That's the other side, right? And so that's where I think that culture is a big part of it, a big part of being able to reinforce the right behaviors and get that education to stick.
But
get people to want to.
Does that require an insane amount of trust? The always say yes approach.
It's yes, but and the thing is that it requires some trust. But the thing is that the person that's making the decision on the risk to accept is at a sufficiently high level, right? So it's not saying, you know, okay, here, I'm going to inform you of this risk. And, you know, you developer who is, you know, 1 year out of college is going to make that decision, right? But we're going to help the team make the decision. We're going to help the leader on that team decide, or whoever it is, make that decision to move forward, right? There is, you know, some amount of trust you have to put in that people will follow the process, right? People will run things through, and you know, same way, you know, you have different approaches to catching bugs in code, right? Which is you want to try to catch some in the design, then you want to catch some with testing, then you're going to catch some of them in production, right? It's the same thing, which is you hope that you get most of them in the designing and the planning, right? Some of it you may get when you're testing stuff out before you release it. And then you just have to have a process for, okay, we detected this out in the wild. How do we quickly get that work done and resolved and patched and understand the impact of it? And it's the same way, right? Which is you have to cover all those bases. You're never going to catch everything before it
I
goes
like
out.
that. I like that. So it's not like there's this one governing rule or policy which shuts everyone out or brings everyone in. It's really understanding at all the different levels, pre, mid, post, whatever, that there are processes and ideas in place to help people through that.
And that's what I think the only way you build this culture where security isn't a step. Security and privacy is not a step. It's part of everything we do. Robustness, reliability, security, privacy, resilience, like it's part of everything we think about at different aspects and to different levels.
Cool. Wow.
Lots of fun stuff, huh?
Well, talking to people about it is fun-ish, but just the topic is just ugh.
It is. It's a lot, and especially as a CTO, where you want to build cool tech, you want to move the company forward. It sometimes feels like this is it's a slog. It's just like, oh, this other thing I have to do. And I'll be honest, like there many times where it was burdensome on me too, but I had to keep reminding myself that in many ways it was some of the highest impact, highest leverage work I could do if I could do it correctly. If we could do it in a way that helped the business move forward quickly and safely and not slow the business down, then that impact, even though in many ways it's completely behind the scenes, right? Like it doesn't, like so many people, in many ways you want it to work in such a way that people don't even know it's working, right? Like you don't get excitement for, yes, we weren't breached. But that's one more day that we're not breached is one more exciting day, one more day that shows that, hey, this work behind the scenes is effective.
Yeah, I think that perspective of it is probably the most important work you can do at that stage, because it is the one thing that can shut your company down or saddle you with fees that you can't pay, or tap into insurance premiums or deductibles that are just, I think there's something called co-insurance now where you pay, it's a 50-50 thing. They don't even want to cover the whole thing anymore.
Right, exactly.
And if you start at your level, you start seeing the employees, their livelihood, their families. If one or two bugs get shipped versus one or two privacy laws get broken, I think it is probably some of the most important work we can do to shield. And that's why I want to emphasize that. I want to, scaling companies, they have to focus on this.
Well, I think it's really important that you're focusing on it. And I would say that even before scale, right? Like I think the role of the startup CTO is shifting more to the implicit understanding or requirement that you understand that you have some knowledge of security and privacy and compliance, right? It is just now part of the gig, because you're not going to be big enough early on to have an infosec department. I mean, unless you're working in banking or like something that's like a market where you have to have it, right? There's no other way. You're not going to have the luxury of having an infosec team or some of these other things, and a lot of that, as usually the most technical person in the company, is going to fall on you as a CTO. And
also educating ourselves on what those risks are. I agree with you that I think I have a slightly different view on it, but here's where I agree, and this is what you did.
Yep.
Is even at the brutally early stage, understand the landscape so that you can decide, like you did, When and how am I going to spend our company resources on the compliance and on the certifications? And I love that business pull through approach of, okay, let's push that boundary as far as it will go until we have to be compliant to stretch it even further. But I agree with you that you don't have the luxury anymore as a startup CTO to just say security whatever or compliance whatever, because then you won't know how to make that decision.
Exactly.
Meetesh, you are a scholar and a gentleman.
Thank you.
I long to feed you soon. Thanks for chatting to me.
Thanks for the chat, Etienne. I really appreciate it.
Okay, brother. Good. Stop. Come on. Stop. No. What? Oh, man. Come on.
I'm going to make sure this